fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds. We are back. Pastor Johnny Kelly is back in action, talking all about sin.
Joe, you brought the cold weather today. It is cold outside.
Hey, call me a sinner, my friend. Blame it on me.
All our northern listeners are angry at us because cold for us is like in the low 60s.
Yeah.
Don't get mad at me because I can wear shorts and go fishing 99% of the year. Yeah, man, I want to talk about sin a little bit today. I think there's probably a lot of confusion on what it is.
Let's start there then.
Okay, well, the idea of sin is the idea of something that obviously that it's not just doing something wrong, but it's doing something wrong to God. That is something that He thinks is wrong, and I think the biggest misconception is that sin is a moral offense, like you've committed a moral wrong. And I think it's because we a lot of times we equate like sin with just the old law from the Old Testament. You know, we look at like the Ten Commandments, like, and I'm not saying that those things aren't true, like that those aren't wrong things to do. They are, you know, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't kill, don't commit adultery. All this, those are all moral offenses, and so we equate the idea of sin as a moral issue, but I really don't think, especially when we look at the whole Bible as a whole and we look at the progression that the Bible takes when it talks about Jesus, that it's not that it's a moral offense, but it's really more of a relational offense, that it's a relationship problem. And so whenever we talk about sin, so often I think we equate it to the idea of being, I did something wrong, as opposed to it being I broke a covenant or a promise with somebody relationally. And the best way to put it, it would be like when you the idea of like cheating on your spouse or your spouse cheating on you, that yes, the mere act of doing that thing is a moral offense. It's a moral problem. But the idea is that the real issue is a relational problem. You know, it's a relational thing that you know, it's, yeah, I saw a study a while back, and it was basically talking about how like somebody would rather be cheated on with like a one night stand than be cheated on with somebody who was in a relationship. And the reason why is they would rather it be something that's a moral offense than a relational one. Does that make sense? I hope that.
But either way,
but either way, they're wrong.
Right. And either way, it is, because I'm a little confused. So either way, it's still a sin. And like going back to the Ten Commandments, if you break them, regardless if there's a relationship at all, it's still a sin, or?
Well, yeah. What I'm saying is that when it comes to the offense that sin is a relational one. It's that you relationally are hurting God. You're relationally hurting Jesus. That our salvation, the idea of being saved, the idea of living for God is not it's not based in you did the right thing or you don't do the right thing. It's based on a relationship. The Bible says that the only way to God is through His Son, you know, to have a relationship with Him. And so in order for that to be a sin, it's really a relational offense, not so much a moral one. I'm not saying that the morality side of things is like, well, just go free for all. It's crazy. You know, you can do whatever you want. That's obviously not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that that those things that we do morally that are wrong, the immoral things that we do, it's the problem is that those are almost the symptom of the true problem, which is a break in the relationship. If that's the same way I was equating it with like, if you were cheating on your spouse, that it's showing a break in the relationship more than the actual act. I'm not saying the act is okay. It's not. But to me, and not just to me, but to the Bible, it explains it. There's a story that's in the Bible that shows it a lot, which is a story that a lot of people know, which is the story of the prodigal son, which is basically Jesus was telling a story to sort of explain his love for us. And in the story, there was a man who had two sons, and one son basically went to his dad and said, "I want my inheritance now. I know you're not dead, but I want my money now. I want it now." And it's very rude. You don't do that. You never ask for your inheritance before they pass away. But he says, "Hey, I want my money. Sell your stuff. Give me mine. I want it now. I don't want to wait." And the dad did it in the story, and the son took all the money and took everything and went off to the big city. And the Bible says that he squandered it. Like he partied. He basically squandered his property on the Bible says in reckless living. So he lived recklessly, I'm sure, and they don't dive any deeper than that, but just imagine if somebody gave you a couple $1 million and you went and you blew it in a month in New York City or Las Vegas. Like, that's probably what he did. He just reckless living. He went a little crazy. And so all of a sudden he's in this new city and he's already taken the money that wasn't his to begin with. It was his father's, and he made his father give it to him before it was supposed to be his. So he's taken his father's money and then he has wasted it all. So he took his father's hard work that he had spent his whole life doing or growing, and he wasted it. And then he's stuck in this foreign city with no money and no way to eat or anything. The Bible says that he went and he basically went to a family in that country and said, "Look, I'll feed your hogs for a living. Like I'll feed your pigs out in the field." And he would steal food from the pigs because he was that hungry. And he basically hits rock bottom, and the story goes on that he's going to apologize to his father, and this is where we see what I'm talking about, the difference between like a moral issue or a moral problem and a relational problem, is that he decides that he realizes that his father has all these servants that have food and have a place to sleep and everything, and he goes, "Well, I'd be better off just being a servant to my father." So he decides that he's going to apologize to his father, and he works out what he's going to say. And it's all this is in Luke chapter 15, if you want to read it. And he says that he's going to go to his father and he's going to say, "Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants." And so he got up and he went to go to his dad. And basically what he did in that moment, if you can see what he says, he recognizes that he messed up his relationship with his dad. He doesn't even talk about the more immoral things that he did in this city. That the problem wasn't all the things he was doing in the city. It was that break in that relationship that happened all the way at the very beginning, before he went and did all that stuff. The real problem was he sinned against his father relationally. He did something he shouldn't have done. He had messed up, and it's the idea of, I don't know about you, like, have you ever like betrayed somebody, like done something wrong to somebody? I mean, we've all done it.
Sure. I did it this morning.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. Okay. I can't believe you did that to me. It's one of those things where I'll never feel more low than I will when I realize I've hurt somebody. I can go do if I ever go do a lot of immoral things, I might feel bad about myself and feel bad about what I did, but I'll never feel as low as I do the moment I realize that I've hurt somebody.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense.
Even just a little bit, and I can't imagine, in the story, the prodigal son must have felt horrible, like the shame, the guilt, the self-hatred that he had. And so the idea, is that he committed this relational offense to his father. And the cool thing though is that when we go on with the story, we see something, and we see the heart of God when it comes to sin. I think a lot of times we assume that God is like this holy hand grenade just waiting to explode on our heads. Like he's just waiting for us
The big bad Punisher up above.
Exactly. And that's the way a lot of people feel, like, oh, he's just trying to point out the things I do wrong. But we see that this is not the case at all in the story, because the father doesn't care at all. And in fact, if you follow along in the story, it says that the son is walking to his dad's house, and he's doing that walk of shame. We've all, that you ever, like, when you have to go to apologize to somebody and like you feel like you're walking through cement because you have to do, and you just like, you don't want to do it because it's just this shameful moment where you're gonna have to do this thing. And he's walking and he's trudging along, and the story says that the father saw his son from far off, like he saw him miles away. And here's the dad who knows that his son committed a sin against him relationally, knows that his son has squandered all of his money, knows that his son has gone and done something he absolutely should not have done, and yet the very first reaction he has is not anger. It's not, I can't believe this boy is coming back here. It's none of those things. It says, the Bible says that he saw his son from a long way off, and he felt compassion, and he ran and embraced him. Like his first response was not to come down on him for the relational offense, for the sin that he committed. His first response was not just compassion, but to say, well, I see you making those steps towards me, so I'm going to come towards you even faster. I'm going to run, because he loved him so much. And when he gets to his father, whenever the father and son meet, something cool happens. This is a really cool story. He looks at his dad, and he says, and he starts that apology. Like a couple verses before, I read it to you. Like he had the idea for the apology, which was, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. Now he's face to face with his dad, and he's going to start his rehearsed apology. And he says, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. And his father cut him off before he could finish the statement. His father didn't let him finish apologizing. And this is a really big point that I think so many of us miss when it comes to the idea of sin, because we think of it as immoral, like I did something wrong, as opposed to thinking like I broke somebody's heart. Like I hurt him. That was where the issue started. That was where the beginning of this was. Because the father stops him, basically looks at his son and says, hey, I hear you apologizing. Just shut up for a minute. And he looks at his servants and says, hey, go get the best robe you have. Go get a ring to put on his finger. Let's make some food. We're going to party. My son was lost, and now he is found. So the father runs to him, doesn't even let him apologize. And here's what I think, that a lot of us, when it comes to the idea of sin, we look at it as, I did something wrong, God's mad at me. And it's not what it is. It is, I broke my dad's, I broke God's heart. I relationally messed up. And during that time, I did things that were immoral, that I shouldn't have done. And all he wants is to have me back. I look at it, it with my kids. If they, if they did something like that to me and ran away and were messed up, I know for me, I spent years doing the wrong stuff. I've talked about it in other podcasts, doing drugs and drinking and traveling around with bands and stuff like that.
And then one time you threw something out the car window and hit the other one.
You're going to bring that one up again.
Oh,
yeah.
Man.
I've done all this stuff that was wrong. And the whole time my parents just sat there waiting for me, loving me and welcoming me back. really the way that the father does in the story of the prodigal son. The father was waiting, and here's the biggest part of it is that if you read the story, the father wasn't even concerned whether the boy had learned his lesson yet, because that's not the way grace works. That's not the way mercy works. It's not whether or not, oh, you learned your lesson, now I'm going to love you. That's not the way it works, and that's not the way God works. It's not that He's okay with you doing that stuff. He wants you to grow. He wants you to get better. But His love and His mercy and His grace are not contingent on what you do. They're not contingent on your actions. It is, and that is the biggest indication that sin is a relational offense and not a moral one. Because if it was a moral one, then you would say, okay, you stop doing this, then I will love you and show you grace. If you do this, you get love and grace. But it's not that. It's relational, meaning that there's a lot more emotion involved, and that it's not about whether the father cuts him off in the middle of his apology. He doesn't even care if his son has learned his lesson. He doesn't care if the son is there to make reparations, to give the money back, to do the right thing. He doesn't do anything. He just embraces his son, and it's the most beautiful illustration of what fatherhood really is, that there is nothing that this son can do that is going to make the father love him any less. Regardless of the depth of the sin against the father, there's no grudge that the father is going to hold. And I think so many of us, we hold on to the guilt and the shame of the things that we've done wrong, and we hide because we think that we're basically unworthy. That that like the son, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. He says that, and yet what we see is that the father doesn't even wait to see whether he's learned his lesson. He immediately restores him back to the full status of his son. My son was lost, and now he's found. Let's have a party. Let's celebrate that he is here. And that's exactly what they did. They extending grace, confident grace. That's what he did to his son, because our sin isn't a mystery to God. I mean, if you believe in God, He knows all, He sees all. But the fact is that we can come home like the prodigal son, and even if we're still learning how to not commit those moral offenses, we can fix the relational offense while we're trying to work on those moral issues, while we're trying to get better. I'm a pastor, and I make moral mistakes all the time. We all do. We all make moral mistakes. We get mad and we say something we shouldn't say, or we act a way we shouldn't act, or we show an attitude we shouldn't show. There's and there's a broad spectrum of things that we all do that. But my relationship with God is solid in the midst of me making those mistakes, because me making those mistakes does not affect the grace and the love and the relationship that I have. It's just like a relationship with a husband or wife. Like I can make a mistake and say something that I shouldn't say, or act a way I shouldn't act, and it doesn't affect the love that we have for each other, the relationship we have. It might be the wrong thing to do, and I might have to apologize and say, look, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. I mean, we've all had to do that. But the fact is that our shortcomings, our mistakes, even the relational sin that we have, is the relational issues that we have. He still loves us in the middle of all of that. There's a book by a guy named Brennan Manning, and he has a quote in it, and this is the quote. Listen, this is really cool. It says, though God does not condone or sanction evil, He does not withhold His love because there's evil in us. Because of how we feel about ourselves, it's sometimes difficult to believe this. We cannot accept love from another human being when we do not love ourselves, much less accept the fact that God could possibly love us. We look at the things that we've morally done wrong, and we think that He couldn't love us, but His love is relational, and His grace is relational, and it's always there. And I think what we have to do is be able to stop looking at the mercy and grace of God as a response to our sin. Those aren't responses to the things we've done wrong. They just are. He has grace and love for us all the time, mercy for us all the time. They're not in response to the things we've done wrong. They just happen to help us when we have done something wrong. Does that make sense?
Yes. So on the flip side, and now I'm almost looking through the lens of the other brother, which we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah.
And it's well, if that's the case, why do sins matter, right? If they're always going to be forgiven, why don't I go out there and just be full of debauchery and, blowing my money on, drugs or women or whatever it might be? What's the answer to that? Like, why does
the fact is that they do separate us from them, because when we commit that, it's not that they don't matter. It's, they do separate us from that person. If you commit that relational offense to God, there was a separation between those two sons. And the fact is that there was a separation with the older brother as well. That if we go on, the older brother basically got mad at his dad, like, why are you bringing him back in here? You shouldn't do that. There's no way you should. How can you think that it is okay to bring him? And both of them, though, were really estranged from the father. One was estranged from the father, living in a faraway land, doing the wrong thing. The other was estranged from his father, living in the same house, because he didn't understand the father's love. One was assuming that he was no longer worthy because he had done something wrong. The other one was assuming the same thing about his brother. Like, well, he is not worthy because he has done something wrong. And there are a lot of people that live with the idea that the morality is the issue instead of the relationship, and they're still within the church, and they're doing the right things, and it's not an issue that just affects just the people that have done something wrong. The fact is that it is still a separation from that person. It is still a separation. Like, if you break that relational boundary, then there is still a break in that relationship. The fact is, though, that relationship is with God, who has nothing but grace and love and is ready and willing to forgive us at any given moment, which isn't always the case when it comes to human relationships. If you break that relationship with your husband or your wife, they may forgive you and they may have that grace for you and that love for you to get back, but they may not. And so there is that break. And yes, he is always there waiting. But the fact is that in the meantime, you are living separate from him. And that's not the healthiest place to be. It's not a place that's going to lead you to, the Bible says, to a place of hope. That hope does not fail us, that whenever we live a life that is full of God, that we live a life that is full of hope, a hope for a future, that there's a plan for us. And the fact is that when we are separating ourselves from him, then all of a sudden we've removed that idea of hope. We've removed that idea of a future. And yeah, there is always the chance for us to come back. It's always there. But in the meantime, you are living separate from him. You're living far away from him, and it's not a good place to be. It's not a healthy place to be. And yes, it is a place that can lead to death and damnation and all that other stuff, because you separated yourself from him. And it's not because you did the moral issues. It's because you broke the relationship off. And that's why I said it goes back to, like, I'll make moral mistakes, but I'm not breaking my relationship off with God. He's not happy when I make those moral mistakes. And I have to ask for forgiveness and help me get past it, God, and help me grow and be better. But the fact is that in the midst of those, my relationship with him is still strong. The son that we see here severed that relationship. When I was 18, I got in a fight with my dad. I remember I got in an 18-year-old's fight that he gets in with his dad. And my dad is a pastor. He actually is the kids pastor for my church now that I pastor. So he's my kids pastor. And so I grew up with a dad who was a pastor my whole life. He became a pastor a couple years before I was born and has been full-time pastor ever since, my whole life. And I remember getting in a fight with my dad. We just butted heads so much. I was 18 years old. I was in a band and I was going to do what I wanted to do. And I looked at my dad and I said the swear word I think everybody knows what the swear word is, and I said the swear word. I yelled at him, blank you, and I'm out. And I walked out of the house and I left. And what I did in that moment is I severed the relationship. Now, he still was there waiting for me and loving me and wanting me to come back and wanting me to live a good, healthy life. That the life that I have now, he wanted for me then. He was not happy with me in that moment. But in that moment, I had severed my relationship with him. I had walked away. He was still reaching out to me, but I was not reaching out to him, which means that if I got into that place where I needed help, he's not the person I was going to reach out to because I thought the relationship was gone. And for so often, I think for us, we sever a relationship with God, and he's not the place we reach out to. He might be the person we blame, but he's not the one we reach out to. And we try to fix it every other way. I mean, how many times do we try to fix issues with a credit card or a bank or other, making underhanded deals or doing the wrong things? Like, we try to do this stuff, and God's going, I'm still reaching here. I'm still there. My dad was still reaching. He still loved me, and he was still there for me. And he helped to bring me back in to a good relationship with God and with him a few years later. But in that meantime, and that's where that break is, where that problem is that when you sever that relationship, like, all of a sudden, like, I didn't think that was an option anymore. I walked out. I was gone. I moved out of my parents' house that day, and I left. I didn't see either one of them for weeks. I just left.
You just dropped him with a little F-bomb, and you were out of there, huh?
I didn't say it was the F-bomb that you're saying. It was, though. And it's what I did, and I yelled at him and I walked out. I came back like 3 weeks later when they were at work to pick up my clothes. So I had moved out. I moved in with a buddy, and I was gone. And I severed that relationship. And that's where I mean, like, it's a relational problem that we have to be able to get past. Both the sons in this story were estranged from their father. One was far away, one was close, but both of them basically were independently living without the knowledge of the father's heart for them. And so what it comes down to is that we have to remember that his love for us is not in response to the sin that we do. His mercy is not in response to the things that we've done. It just is. He has love and mercy and grace that is always there for us no matter what we have done. That doesn't mean he wants you to do bad things, but here's the deal. Fix the relationship and work on fixing the morals problems. You don't need to become perfect to have a relationship with God, because you're not going to be perfect. You'll never have a relationship if that's what you're waiting for. Have a relationship with him and then start working on being a better person and doing the right things. You can maintain a good relationship and still make mistakes. But if you've separated yourself from him, or have never made that relationship ever happen, he's not judging whether he's going to give you love or grace based on the things you've done wrong. It doesn't matter what you've done wrong. His love and grace is still there for you. Does that make sense?
It does. It's awesome, man. Usually I try to chime in, but I don't know that I could add any more value to this. This would be good. And seriously, before we went on, we kind of talked about this just briefly, and I wasn't connecting all the dots, because I think of sin as that moral thing of, hey, someone, let's just say it's a man, and I've done this, back before I got married, especially I had daughters, going into like a strip club or something. Like, is that a sin even if you don't do anything? Or, I completely get it, the relationship part, and it's so much easier now for me to understand the relationship part with a spouse or a friend or anyone you've hurt. And then, of course, the Heavenly Father up above. It's just been good.
Well, it leads you back. Like, if you're ever wondering if something is a sin, does it hurt somebody? It doesn't hurt the relationship you have with God. Does it hurt it? Because if it does, then it is. Then it's wrong. You shouldn't do it. It's not a, all right, well, the Bible doesn't tell me this one, so I can It's not about pushing the line. You know, that's ridiculous. If your kid pushes the line and says, "Well, you said I could do this, but I didn't do that. I did this." Like,
whammy.
And you look at your kid and you go, "Shut up. You know better. You know what you were doing." That's what I'll do with my kids when if they push the line, like, "Well, you said I couldn't do this, but I didn't. I did this," and it's like the same thing but barely differently. And we'll do the same thing with God when it comes to our sin, which is ridiculous. Like, does it hurt the relationship? Does going to a strip club hurt the relationship you have with your wife? Or does it hurt the relationship you have with God? If it does, then yeah, it's wrong. Like that's the issue, and it's a relational problem. So yeah, it's hard to connect it until you hear the whole story. That's why it just is.
Yep, and sounds like you were your own little prodigal son. With I did not know that part. That's wow.
Yeah, I was mean. But I'm not anymore. I'm very loving and sweet. I really am. Just ask my wife and kids. I love them to death. Anyways,
this has been good.
Yes,
man. All right, guys. We promised we're going to keep these shorter. I was going to keep going, but I'm looking at the time, so we are going to end it here. If you have questions on this, any kind of questions or other topics, other subjects, other questions that you want us to cover, let us know. My email, Joe, @saltstrong.com. Johnny?
Johnny, JOHNNY, @discoverfamilychurch.com. And I'm sure that, obviously this was a 30 minutes, so there are questions and I didn't dive super deep into everything. And so if there are areas that you go, "Hey, what about this? What about that?" Let me know, man. I'd love to answer any questions. I'm not trying to make a definitive statement on everything out of this 30 minutes. This is a brief overview on the heart of God.
Yeah, and just to open people's eyes, and it's certainly opened mine. So I might even email you with some questions. And if you guys happen to be in Central Florida, especially Lakeland area, go check them out. Are you guys doing one service, two services this Sunday?
One service right now. We're looking at probably moving to two in the next couple of months. But yeah, one service right now, 10 a.m. Sunday mornings, discoverfamilychurch.com. We're right in front of the Lakeland Square Mall. And it'd be really great to see you. We'd love to have you. Guys, thank you for all the love, all the support. Make sure if you haven't, go leave us a review. It helps out big time. Subscribe to the Salt Strong podcast. We keep doing more of these, reaching more people, impacting more people. And every Sunday we will have a version of the Salt Strong Unchurched. Yeah. I'm enjoying these. I'm learning each and every time. It feels like it's something I needed to hear. Interesting how God works. So, guys, thank you so much. We be out until next time. Peace. Peace out. 'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was passed down to me from the days of old. To find us on the water, if there was a way. It's been said my papa, he wrote the book on catching big reds and 20-pound snook. I wish I knew all the things he knew today. For he's the reason why we are this way. And he put fish in our soul.